What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back for my Game of Thrones Season 7 Episode 6 breakdown video. There is a lot to discuss about this episode, so let's just get right into it. The episode begins beyond the wall with Jon Snow and company on their mission to capture a white that they need to take back down south to King's Landing in hopes of gaining the support from Cersei Lannister after they show her that the threat is real. While they are traveling in search of the dead, Tormund Giantsbane says something very interesting to Jon Snow. Tormund asks Jon about the Dragon Queen because he wants to know what Jon thought of her himself. Jon says that she will only help him if he bends the knee, and up until now, Jon has refused to bend the knee to Daenerys Targaryen. Jon knows that the Northern Lords would never stand beside him if he bent the knee to a Targaryen. Jon has also had many influences in his life. During his short relationship with Mance Rayder, Jon grew to respect Mance even though he was looked at as the enemy. Jon admired what he was able to do and what he was willing to sacrifice for his people, even though he thought it was a terrible mistake. Tormund tells Jon that he spent too much time with the free folks, so now he doesn't want to bend the knee. Tormund also says that Mance was a proud man who never bent the knee, but how many of his people had to die because he refused? You could see that Jon acknowledged what Tormund had said, and I think he might have even been surprised to hear someone like Tormund say something like that. Jon knows he's going to run the risk of losing his support from the northern houses by bending the knee to Daenerys Targaryen, but I think he will do what is needed in order to save as many people as he can. The other Northern Lords have not seen the things that Jon has seen beyond the wall, but if they have, they would bend the knee too, and get all the help that they can. When the Night King and his army get south of the wall and the dead are marching in everyone's backyard, they will realize their differences will have to be put aside in order to survive. And once the Northerners see that Daenerys is also willing to risk her own life and sacrifice her dragons to save everyone else, they will grow to respect her too. This episode also had a ton of very obvious foreshadowing in it. I think it's safe to say that Jon and Daenerys are probably going to end up having a child together. Or I guess I should say Daenerys will get pregnant by Jon, but I can't say whether or not the child will survive the pregnancy. There was at least 3 different references in this episode alone about Jon having children and Daenerys being able to have children. While they are hiking, Jon pulls Jorah to the side and he offers to give Longclaw back to Jorah since the sword had been in his family for so long, but Jorah does not accept his offer because he said his father, Lord Commander Mormont, gave it to Jon for a reason. Jorah tells Jon to keep the sword. He says it's going to serve you well and your children after you. And I actually like the way that they did this scene. I think it would be great if Jon did have a child of his own. Even if he does die, it would be nice for him to have a piece of him left behind to carry on his legacy and carry his sword. Back in Winterfell, Arya confronts Sansa about the letter she wrote to their brother Robb Stark. Arya is angry because Sansa asked Robb to come to King's Landing and swear fealty to Joffrey. But what's even worse than that is Arya is angry because she thinks their father was killed with Sansa's help. She says that Sansa betrayed their entire family while she stayed with the Lannisters, and there was actually a few different things that I thought about this. First, I just want to say that I do appreciate Arya's passion for wanting to protect her family, but I think she was out of line. Arya really has no idea Sansa was left with little choice but to write Robb that letter, and Sansa did try to help Ned avoid his execution. Has Arya already forgot that she actually served Tywin Lannister while he planned the war against Robb Stark? And has Arya already forgot that Jagan Hagar offered to kill any 3 people of her choice, but Arya never had him kill Tywin Lannister, who went on to orchestrate the massacre at the Red Wedding? Personally, I'm not a big Sansa fan, but I don't think she deserved to be verbally attacked here by Arya. Arya also knows that Littlefinger conspired with Tywin Lannister, yet Arya is letting him walk freely around Winterfell without ever confronting him. I think Arya needs to realize that she is being played by Littlefinger and she's doing exactly what he wanted her to do. I don't blame her for feeling protective over her family, but she just went about it the wrong way. In the next scene, Tormund and the Hound provide us with some comedy relief, and I must say I have been waiting a long time for Tormund and the Hound to have some screen time together. I actually thought it was pretty funny when Tormund stuck his finger out at the Hound and he said he was kissed by fire too. I was just waiting for the Hound to grab that finger and snap it off. You could also tell Tormund hasn't been around any woman for a while because he starts to tell the Hound about his fantasies of having children with Brienne that would one day grow up and conquer the world. Can you imagine if Tormund and Brienne did have a child together? Their kid could probably grow up and take down a dragon without using any weapons. I also really like the next scene too with Jon and Beric Dondarrion. I was actually talking to Gray Area one day and we were discussing what we liked about Game of Thrones so much, and we both came to the agreement that some of the best scenes are when characters are just traveling together and talking. I love big epic battles, but I also love when characters just talk about regular things, or even deeper things like what is their purpose in life. Some of the best dialogue comes from when characters are traveling in this show. Beric starts talking to Jon about Ned Stark, and he tells him he doesn't look like him, so that must mean Jon looks like his mother, Lyanna. It's not often that we ever get to see Jon Snow happy or even satisfied, but for a very brief second, Jon comes to the realization about what his purpose is, and it's very subtle, but he almost cracks a smile when he realizes it. He won't find much joy while he is here, but what he can do is fight for those who can't fight for themselves. He can be the shield that guards the realms of men. That's all he really needs to understand. Back on Dragonstone, Daenerys continues to fall in love with her nephew, and Tyrion confirms it. There was also a lot of foreshadowing in this scene as well. Daenerys talks about meeting Cersei for the parlay scene when Jon gets back with the White. Tyrion says that they were going to show up with 2 armies and 3 dragons, but unfortunately later in this episode one of those dragons die, so now they will only be showing up with 2 dragons, and this may give Cersei even more confidence that the dragons can be killed. It's very clear that Daenerys isn't as unstoppable as she once seemed. The next discussion Tyrion and Daenerys has a few different layers of foreshadowing in it. Daenerys wants to break the wheel and do things differently than her ancestors did before her, especially her father the Mad King. And Tyrion asked her how she plans on keeping the wheel broken after she is dead. What system can they put in place to ensure this? Tyrion mentions that Daenerys can't have any children, and this makes the second time in this episode they have foreshadowed someone having a baby. One time with Jon, and a second with Daenerys. So it's getting pretty obvious to me that Jon and Daenerys will hook up and she will get pregnant. She should not be able to have any children anymore, but I think the death of her dragon Viserion will be a type of payment that will allow her to get pregnant with an actual child. Mirri Maz Duur once told Daenerys that only death can pay for life. So I think Viserion's death will allow Daenerys to get pregnant again, but possibly this time she can actually give birth to the child. I also got the vibe that Daenerys might die after listening to this discussion about naming a successor. Daenerys didn't even want to speak about it until she actually gets the crown, but I don't know if she's ever going to see that day. Not only could I see her dying in battle, but I could also see her dying during childbirth, and once again, death would pay for life. We saw her vision at the House of the Undying, and she was never actually able to touch the throne. Personally, I don't think she will. Besides, Jon Snow is the true heir after all. Back up north beyond the wall, Jon and his companions run into a freaking zombie polar bear with glowing blue eyes. And I thought this was a great scene. The weapons the Night King has in his army are just getting crazier and crazier. First we saw him with 3 giants at the beginning of this season, now he has a polar bear and he eventually gets a dragon. There are actually snow bears in the books as well, but it seems as if the show is starting to bend the rules about how whites and white walkers can be killed. They caught the polar bear on fire, but it didn't die, it just kept right on fighting. Since the bear didn't die by fire, then that must mean it's a white walker bear. But Jorah ran up and stabbed it with the dragonglass dagger and the bear died immediately, but it didn't shatter into pieces like the White Walkers typically do, which I thought was strange. I don't know if this polar bear was supposed to be a white or a White Walker bear. Whites usually die by fire, but now they die with dragonglass too for some reason. But unfortunately, during all of this, Thoros of Myr was badly injured. The Hound would have been dead if it wasn't for Thoros stepping in while the Hound turned into reek when he saw the fire. The Hound seriously needs to snap out of this at some point or he's going to end up getting other people killed. Back in Winterfell, Littlefinger suggests to Sansa that Brienne should be put on standby in case Arya tries anything slick. Littlefinger's plan is working perfectly right now. He needs Arya out of the way so he can have Sansa all to himself to manipulate and influence. If Littlefinger can have Sansa all to himself, he can be back in position to control everything. You can tell Littlefinger's plan was starting to rub off on Sansa too. She was definitely contemplating his suggestion. Arya needs to speak up about Littlefinger conspiring with Tywin, or Bran needs to look into the past and see the crimes that Littlefinger has committed. This needs to be stopped at once or else one of the Stark sisters could end up dead. But they're gonna wake up soon enough and Arya will kill Littlefinger with his own dagger. The next scene had some foreshadowing in it as well. Tormund spots a small group of whites walking with one of the White Walkers, so they plan to attack this small group and capture one of those whites. I have to be honest with you though, it almost felt as if this was all a setup. When Bran sent the Ravens up to spy on the army, they were all marching together towards Eastwatch, but now that Jon and them are up there, they just suddenly stumble on a dozen of them wandering around. It kind of felt out of place. I thought the entire army should be marching together still, non-stop, unless the Night King had all of this planned in order to get a dragon to knock down the wall. But that wouldn't make much sense either, because that would mean the Night King had no other way of getting south unless he had a dragon, which would be stupid because if Daenerys never took her dragons up there, then the Night King could have never made it south. What also made it feel like a setup was because the Night King and his White Walkers just sat on their horses as Jon Snow and company were stuck in the middle of the lake. The Night King brings the cold with him, so he could have frozen that lake anytime he wanted, but he didn't. He could have thrown his ice spear at them too while they were stuck there just sitting ducks, but he never did that either. That's what makes me think he was waiting for Daenerys to show up, almost like he knew she would come. We know the Night King has some kind of green seer ability because he entered Bran's vision and he physically touched Bran too. So he might actually be able to see how things are going to play out in the future, but I could be dead wrong about this. Maybe it's just bad writing or a way of adding drama to the scene. But anyways, Jon and his team ambushed the Whites and White Walker, and what I loved about this was how Jon Snow went right for the White Walker himself. That definitely took balls. But when Jon killed the White Walker, all of the skeleton whites simultaneously dropped too, which means whenever you kill the creator, their creations die too. This White Walker must have raised these whites himself, which is very interesting because we haven't been told this yet. Every White Walker must be capable of raising the dead, but only the Night King can raise a large group at once like he did at Hardhome. So now it's very obvious how to defeat the whole army. If you kill the Night King, it will kill everything he created and controls. After they subdued the White, Jon sends Gendry back to Eastwatch so he can get word to Daenerys that they are in trouble. And I'm not actually sure how Jon knew Gendry was the fastest one there. I'm guessing just because he was the youngest. But what I also didn't understand was how Gendry was going to know his way back. This is the first time Gendry has ever been north of the wall, so unless you can actually see the wall from where they were, he might have had some trouble getting back. Unless their footprints were still in the snow. We can't actually be sure how far away they were, but it had to be close to the Three-Eyed Raven's cave because the arrowhead-shaped mountain was right there, and that's where the Children of the Forest created the Night King. They end up spending at least one night stuck on the rock in the middle of the lake, and Thoros of Myr dies during the night, and I was actually kind of surprised the Night King didn't raise Thoros while they all had their eyes closed. He could have raised Thoros in the middle of the night and killed at least one or two of them, but I'm also glad he didn't because I like Thoros of Myr and I wouldn't want to see him come back like that. But it was a smart move for them to burn his body. If I were them, I would have taken Gendry's hammer and broken all the ice around the rock, and every time it started to freeze again, I would have taken the hammer and broken it all again, at least until Daenerys showed up. Back in Winterfell, Sansa receives word from King's Landing. The parlay scene is starting to be set in motion. In the next episode, we will see nearly all of the main characters gather at the Dragon Pit to discuss terms about the upcoming War for the Dawn. I was pretty surprised Sansa was so quick to send Brienne away. I know she doesn't want to be treated as a child, but with all the tension in Winterfell, you'd think she'd want the protection. Not only is Arya breathing down her neck, but Sansa knows firsthand exactly what Littlefinger is capable of and willing to do. Back on Dragonstone, Daenerys has received a raven too, and it's telling her that Jon and Jorah and everybody else is in some serious trouble. And I have no idea how the raven got there so fast, but we also have no sense of time in the show anymore. We don't know if days or weeks are passing by with each scene. The timelines and the way people travel in this world is a mystery to me. I was pretty disappointed in Tyrion though. He did not want Daenerys going to help them, and I understand he was trying to keep her safe, but I was expecting Tyrion to show a little more compassion for Jon and Jorah. Does Tyrion really think they can survive the winter without Jon? Because I don't. You need him just as much as you need Daenerys. Back beyond the wall, someone should have told the Hound you shouldn't throw stones when you live in a glass house. He threw a rock that was too damn big and it went bouncing across the ice, letting the White know that the ice is now frozen solid, and this is when the battle begins. I am a sucker for battle scenes, what can I say? I thoroughly enjoyed watching some of my favorite characters fight this massive army of Whites. It was very entertaining in my opinion. Seeing Beric with the flaming sword, and Jon with Longclaw, and Jorah with his dual dragonglass daggers, and Tormund and the Hound side by side, I thought it was outstanding. Then Daenerys shows up and starts raining dragonfire on them all. I have been waiting so long to see the dragons and the whites and White Walkers and Night King in the same scene together. I had a lot of fun watching this sequence. But then, the inevitable happened. One of the dragons was killed in epic fashion. The Night King channeled his inner Tom Brady and he launched an ice spear about a quarter mile into the sky. Now I knew he had superhuman strength, but damn, he has a cannon for an arm. I know some people were wondering why he didn't kill Drogon instead, since Drogon was literally like 100 feet away from him just sitting on the ground. My only guess is he saw Viserion as the bigger threat at that moment. Since Drogon was turned around shooting fire in the opposite direction, he saw Viserion heading his way shooting fire, and he figured he better take him down first. Since Drogon was already landed on the ground and they were waiting for Jon, I think he thought if he took Viserion out first, Drogon would still be there because Jon wasn't on him yet, and then he could take his second shot at Drogon too. But that's just a guess. But anyways, Jon gets tackled into the damn lake, so Daenerys has to take off before the Night King takes out Drogon too. And I know some of you was asking me on Twitter about Jon's sword. While Jon was under the water, the eyes were closed on the sword. But when Jon came up and took his breath, the eyes appeared to open. I think there is some type of stones for its eyes, because when Jon came up and the water splashed, it made the stones look black. And you can actually see them glisten as Jon grabs the sword and climbs out. You might have to watch it on slow motion to see it though. And it could be symbolic too, but I don't think so, it just appeared that way. When Jon does get back out of the water, he's nearly overrun by all the whites as he suffers from hypothermia. But then Benjen Ex Machina shows up just in time to give Jon his horse to escape. Personally, I think Benjen could have gotten on the horse too. When he saved Bran and Mira, he put both of them on his horse. So there was 3 people on his horse at one time. So he could have easily picked Jon up and rode off with him too. It definitely would have slowed the horse down significantly if 2 people were on it, but Benjen wanted to go out in style. I respect him for that, but I will also miss him too. I just hope he doesn't come back as a full-blown white and Jon is forced to kill him. But it did feel good to hear Jon actually get to say Uncle Benjen and actually see him again. Jon got to see him one last time, although it was extremely brief. Jon actually died thinking someone knew where his Uncle Benjen was. But this time his Uncle Benjen actually saved his life. We all knew Jon was going to be saved somehow, so this wasn't a surprise, but I was still pleased he got to see his uncle one more time. Everyone else makes it back to the wall and the Hound gets to wait in the boat to take the King's Landing for the next episode's big parlay scene. Jon shows up just in time before they leave and they get him on the boat and strip him out of his frozen clothes. And Daenerys is actually watching and she sees all of Jon's scars from when he was killed. When I was looking at Jon's scars, I couldn't help but think of the Night King. The Night King took a dagger to his chest, so Jon and the Night King have both been stabbed in the heart. And I wonder if there's some deeper meaning to this that has yet to be revealed. We get some more foreshadowing here too, when we get our 3rd reference in this episode about someone having children. Jon wakes up and apologizes for Viserion being killed. And Daenerys says the dragons are the only children she will ever have. But like I said before, Jon and Dany will hook up and Jon will get her pregnant. I think Viserion's death will pay for life, allowing for Daenerys to get pregnant by Jon. I am actually 100% confident this will happen before Season 8 ends. Daenerys gives Jon her word. They will destroy the Night King together. Jon now has some of the support he has been looking for. Now he just needs Cersei to play ball. Jon calls Daenerys his queen and he said he would bend the knee if he physically could, but he actually really didn't have to now that she agreed to help him, but I think Jon mostly offered this because he felt bad about Viserion dying. He could see how shaken up she was about this, but Daenerys also proved her worth to Jon. She didn't have to show up and save him, but she put her life and her dragon's lives in danger to save Jon and the others, and Jon recognizes that and he appreciates that. Plus, earlier in the episode, Tormund reminded Jon that Mance didn't bend his knee and thousands of people had to die because of that. And Jon doesn't want his people to meet the same fate. This episode ends with the whites pulling the dragon out of the water. And I know everyone has been asking about these chains, and I'm just going to assume they got these chains from Hardhome, because many ships have docked there before. The Night King did take full control of Hardhome, so I am sure they sacked the place for everything that it had. But where he got those chains really isn't that important at this point, because the Night King now has a dragon, and he's going to use this dragon to get past the wall with his entire army. We should see his entire army of the dead south of the wall when Season 8 begins. Now they just have to hope this White will convince Cersei to provide them with the support to stop the army of the dead. But Cersei is not going to care about that right now. She is only worried about the immediate threat to her throne. If Cersei never ends up helping them, then Viserion basically died for nothing, other than helping the Night King seem even more unstoppable than he already is. There was obviously a lot of inconsistencies with this episode, so many things didn't make sense logically, but this happens almost every episode now, so I'm not all bent out of shape about it. I still thoroughly enjoyed this episode. Anytime I can see my favorite characters fight the dead, I'm pretty happy with that because it's always fun to watch. And I also enjoyed all the callbacks and references as everyone reminisced about people they knew from the past. Like I said earlier in this video, I really enjoy scenes where characters are just traveling together and talking. That's usually when we get some of the best dialogue in the episodes. But comment down below and let me know what you thought about this episode. What did you like? What did you hate? I'm going to start working on my episode 7 preview trailer breakdown video. That way I can release that tomorrow. So I hope you all come back for that. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this one.